All right. Let me start by saying that I've been fighting a sore throat for the last 12 hours now. Kind of feel like crap, but I don't have to do the job where I leave the house until Thursday, so I'll be fine. I'll just video in between feeling like crap. We got to talk about games because there's one that starts in 20 minutes. So I have to get in my view on the game before it starts, and it's San Jose and Buffalo, which is interesting. So San Jose came into this season with not a lot of expectations as a contender, but I think 4-5 is a record that would have disappointed them, so they're going to want to even that. And they're against Buffalo, and Buffalo is an organization that is desperate to get out of rebuild mode. They have all the pieces now that they need to contend. They have the forwards, they have the top defenseman, Ristolainen, and they have Leonard. And I know there's Buffalo fans who don't like Leonard, but he's a good goaltender. Not Vezina winning, but he's a good goaltender. And there's no reason to look for a new goalie at this point if you're Buffalo. They just got to put it all together. And Phil Housley, I think he'll do it. But then again, I didn't think Rick Tocchet was going to be a disaster in Arizona either. Tampa has won 4 in a row. They're at home against Anaheim. Anaheim has got to be embarrassed. The Ducks have to be embarrassed with their last outing. And Tampa is on a roll. So I expect this game to be a lot tighter than other people may. Notice I'm saying may. There's always that section of the fan base like, yeah, we're going to kill them. It's going to be like 5-1 or 6-0, or look what happened to them with Florida. They're going to get killed. Anytime that a team loses a game and it's really lopsided like that, they will usually come back with a very good game the next time around because hockey players have a lot of pride, and those games have to wound that pride. So we'll see. Tampa at home against Anaheim. And that'll be fun. I'll probably watch that one. Arizona's in Jersey. New Jersey's 7-2. Arizona's lost 10 in a row. I would love to predict that Arizona's finally going to win a game tonight. That tonight's the night. Arizona's going to win, and I'll watch bits and pieces of that, and hopefully I'll see an Arizona victory. And I say that not because I don't want to see New Jersey win, but because I genuinely feel bad for the Coyotes. I genuinely do. I think this has been a really, really rough time for them. And yeah, this just it can't continue at this the way it's been going. It just can't. So yeah. So if you're a fan of the Coyotes, I'm right there with you right now. Detroit's in Florida, so 6-game losing streak. Florida got off the schneid with their win over Anaheim. And here we go. It's a battle of teams trying to prove they're not have-nots this year. We're early enough that you can prove you're not a have-not. If Detroit's going to start doing that, they have to do it tonight. Lose another one, they lose 7 in a row. Yeah. That nice start they had is kind of forgotten now. The Kings are in Boston. Oh boy. I'll watch that one. Jonathan Quick's coming into this with an 11,000 save percentage. He's got a gaudy save percentage. Boston's coming into this with Hudobin. So I love Charlie McAvoy. I love David Pastrnak. Torrey Krug. Numerous young Bruins. I'm not betting that they will get through those Kings, but it'll be fun watching them try. In their favor, the Kings are 8-1-1, and those records usually don't last. And yet, here's Vegas and Tampa with gaudy records too. The Rangers are in Montreal in a battle of teams having miserable seasons where fans are screaming for the heads of either coaches or GMs. It's weird, too, because you look at them, and their records are very similar. And if Montreal wins tonight and they win in regulation, their records are almost identical. And yet, in Montreal, everybody wants to get rid of the GM, and Rangers fans seem to want to get rid of the coach. So where the problem is, people seem to disagree between the Rangers and Montreal, which is because the Rangers GM is perceived as being really good at his job. Montreal's is perceived as being bad at his job. Now, I like what Claude Julien did for the Bruins. I can't say bad things about Claude Julien, but a lot of players in Montreal underachieving under Claude Julien. And if you've got a GM who's saying, well, tough, they have to deal with it, and they don't mesh with Claude Julien's coaching style, that makes for a miserable season. Really, really miserable season. So we'll see what breaks first. If it's going to be Marc Bergevin and his stance that the guys in the room have to fix this, even though they don't seem to mesh with what Julien's doing, or if it's Julien that ends up out of a job. Because just taking Bergevin out of the equation for a minute, it's either the coach is the problem or the roster is the problem. There are no other options. It's not like the lighting is bad, for their home games and road teams are flashing laser pointers in their eyes. No. There is a real reason why Montreal's failing, and if you can just say, all right, well, let's forget Bergevin for a second. It's either the roster or it's the coach. And if Bergevin's job is safe, one of those things would have to change before the end of the year. So it'll be very interesting. In New York, I can't really debate with Rangers fans on the fate of Alain Vigneault, and here's why. They're the same arguments I heard in Vancouver towards the end of his tenure here. He plays the wrong players. He doesn't play enough of the rookies. He's got his favorites, and he plays those guys more than he should. It's all the same arguments I heard about him in Vancouver. Is he guilty of it to some extent? Yes. Although he's very good at talent evaluation, and usually if he's holding a guy out of the lineup, there's a reason why. So I never got on the whole bandwagon of fire Vigneault until the team tuned him out. When a team tunes out their coach, that coach is a dead man walking. His career in that city is over. I haven't watched enough of Rangers to be able to watch the Rangers bench and say, yeah, they've tuned him out. I'll pay attention tonight when I'm doing a lot of channel surfing, apparently, and see if I can perceive anything going on there. Because you can tell. If a coach is behind the players yelling and screaming, and you just see all the guys just sort of staring off into the distance, that look that you give when your mom or your dad's yelling at you, and you're just like, oh, just shut up. Oh, I just want to play video games. Just shut up. The look my kid used to give me. And you'll say whatever you have to, like you would, to make him go away. And it's like, no, I did that to my father. Don't you dare. Don't you dare. I know that game. Don't just agree with everything I say, so I'll leave. Stop it. And you'll see that on a bench, where players are just sort of, yeah, and they're just staring straight. And as soon as the coach walks away, you might see two guys turn to each other and say something. You may like, I can't make out what they said, but it was probably about the coach, and it probably would get bleeped on the air. Phillies in Toronto. This is an interesting matchup. So Toronto's coming off of an embarrassing loss against Columbus. Toronto's coming off of an embarrassing loss against Carolina. Philly's coming off of a loss against Ottawa that, yes, Philly fans, I will give you this, you should have won that game. Philly's going to be very angry. Toronto's going to be very angry. Matt Martin might be busy tonight. Just throwing that out there. And if Pollock's in the game, I haven't looked at the lineups yet, but if Roman Pollock's in the game, he might have his fisticuffs called into action. Because both teams have to be ornery. After the embarrassing loss for Toronto, they should be an angry team because they didn't play well. Philly should be an angry team based on last night's result. And I'm not talking about them just descending into it. I'm talking about one of those games where you're fighting so hard for that win that eventually it leads to gloves getting dropped. I'm not talking about people playing dirty or, oh, here comes Manning to run guys over. No. I'm just talking about there could be some fights tonight because these teams both desperately want to turn it around. Toronto doesn't want to fall back to the pack, and Philly desperately doesn't want to fall below 500 because they don't deserve it. Philly deserves a better record than what they have. Columbus is in St. Louis. Oh, the gods of the schedule have done us a wonderful thing tonight. Columbus, a team that I think is playing very well right now. They came back and they showed a lot of intestinal fortitude with their win over Winnipeg last night, and St. Louis, who are legitimately the best team in the Central and one of the best teams in hockey. And they're doing it with depth, they're doing it with defense, they're doing it with goaltending. This is a dangerous team. And I will say this, if you took this St. Louis Blues team, you took that record, and you just put them all in Blackhawks jerseys, and they were the Blackhawks, we would be talking about how it looks like Chicago could win its 4th Stanley Cup in less than a decade. But because it's St. Louis, I haven't heard a lot of that yet. Every now and then you'll hear on TV, oh yeah, St. Louis is doing well, and then they talk about something else. St. Louis is legitimately doing very, very well, and I'll be looking at some stats today. In between Benylin and arsenic and cyanide and whatever else I have to use on my throat. The Islanders are in Nashville, and this is a game that the Islanders are going to want to win, unlike the ones they don't. You know, and I want to say this right now, I try really hard to avoid using cliches when I talk about this stuff. Because I hear comments on every sports broadcast, and I roll my eyes. It's like when they're talking to a guy in the dressing room, they're like, so, you had 3 goals in that period, how do you feel about how you played? I expect the guy, like, what's the guy going to do? Oh, I played like crap, I should have had 6. You guys lost the game 5-0 tonight, how do you feel about it? I feel like crap. We lost 5-0. How am I supposed to feel? Am I supposed to say, well, I made my money? I'm not Jeremy Roenick. No. It's so weird. So I try really hard when I'm doing these previews and I'm talking about hockey not to use cliches. I do my best not to do that. And it's hard. Because, of course, you know, you want to give 110% and they want to right the ship. And you just, it's so hard. And when I'm looking at Nashville and the Islanders, it's really hard not to use cliches. Because here's Nashville, and they've won their last game, and it was a big emotional game, and the Islanders are coming off of a loss, so, you know. In Nashville's case, they committed this season with the burden now of extra expectation. And that may not have been entirely fair, because they didn't exactly steamroll into the playoffs. They made the playoffs, and they made the Stanley Cup final. But they had to do it on the road, and they had to do it as an underdog. So when an underdog goes to the Stanley Cup final, what usually happens is that there's added expectation the following season because all we see is where they finished. So we look and go, well, Nashville was Stanley Cup champions or Stanley Cup finalists. You know, they pushed Pittsburgh pretty hard. They're going to be number 1 in their division, and I did that myself. I put them as number 1 in their division. But it's not. It's one of those things that it's easy to get enamored with a team that's been in the Stanley Cup final and not see that there's a flaw there. And Nashville, while they have a good record and they should make the playoffs this year, there are flaws there. In come the New York Islanders with John Tavares. And his motivation is simple. The team is now looking at building a new arena and fixing the whole arena thing. Now they have to give him a new contract. So the best way to get a contract offer, play your ass off. And he is. Tavares, while last year's point totals weren't awe-inspiring, he's playing very, very well this year. And I understand that Tavares' game isn't just points. But with the amount of money he's going to be looking for, points are really important, especially for the optics when you're a fan. So, you know, we'll see how this works out. But a successful road trip goes a long way early in the season to paving the way to a successful season from then on. It's the confidence you gain. I think the thing for the Islanders is, can Greiss or Halak be consistent enough for them to get into the playoffs? That, I think, is really the underlying theme with the Islanders. And for Nashville, how many games does Rene play? Because Saros does not look good when he's played. Okay, Pittsburgh's in Minnesota. So Minnesota's coming off a win, and Pittsburgh's won their last 2. And anytime I talk about Pittsburgh, there's divergent opinions. There are Pittsburgh fans who feel that they are still in line for 3 in a row and that they're playing well. They've had a couple of crappy games that make their record look a lot worse than what it is. But if you remove those crappy games, they're 7-1-1. Then the rest of people watching this would go, hey, you can't just remove losses. That's not how the standings work. And they'd be right. So because Pittsburgh occasionally lays an egg, Minnesota's the kind of team to take advantage of that. And they won their last game, and that was after a lackluster game by them against the Vancouver Canucks. This to me looks like a game that could get out of hand in favor of Minnesota. Just because, the Wild work so bloody hard. And I know that they have injury issues and whatnot, but they work so hard. Chicago's in Colorado. My God, Colorado. And I was discussing this on Twitter last night during the 7-0 loss to Vegas, that Colorado had outplayed Vegas for a large portion of that game, and then suddenly it's 4-0 Vegas. Vegas last night had a 33.3 shooting percentage, which means that Varlamov had a 66.7 save percentage. Not good. For Colorado tonight, they need to stop the bleeding. And they got to do it against a Chicago team that does look vulnerable. Now, if Chicago loses this game, and let's just say St. Louis and Nashville win their games, I don't know how long a Chicago losing streak would go before there'd be some form of panic. Remember now, Chicago lost in the first round 2 years in a row. And management comes out and says, we're going to make drastic changes. Things are going to change around here, guys. It's going to change. And in the end, the changes were minor. Very minor changes. So if Chicago loses this one, and if they get on somewhat of a losing streak, I don't know what you do, because you can't fire Quenneville. Quenneville's the best coach in the NHL, probably not named Babcock. I would say Mike Babcock's probably the best coach, and people will argue with me about that. And I go back and forth on that. I do. But Quenneville is still an amazing coach, and I think Chicago would be insane to let him go. So that'll be an interesting game tonight. And then the late night game, the 7 o'clock game, my time, 10 o'clock Eastern, is Washington. The Washington injured team in Edmonton against an Oilers team looking to get on a roll. With the injuries Washington's had and the exposure in his lack of depth through both the salary cap and just the fact that so many guys left in the offseason, Edmonton could absolutely put a beating on Washington the same as Vancouver did. Absolutely. Edmonton's shooting percentage has been low so far this year, and that's going to change. For Washington, their hot start is forgotten. They're 4-5-1, and a loss tonight in the Metro Division, that's bad. Now, working in Washington's favor, there's a lot of teams off to bad starts, but you don't want to keep going. Edmonton, though, I'd like to see Edmonton turn it around. It's not because I'm an Edmonton fan. It's because the league's more interesting when the Oilers are good. The league's more interesting for me when certain Canadian teams are good. Although, then I'm saying that basically the league's boring without them. Let me know what you guys think in the comment section below. It's a lot of games tonight. It's a lot to take in. Let me know which games you'll be watching. Hit like and subscribe if you're browsing your way through. Those buttons are always our friends. And thanks for watching. I'll talk to you again soon.